And we're continuing with the 8th chapter of An Acceptable Time by Madeleine L'Engle. They sat on the stone chairs within the great ring of stones, Polly, Anarol, Corrales, Cub, Tav, Zachary, the bishop, and several others of the people of the wind. Polly still had a feeling of nightmare from the strange battle between two small armies or bands of people. They could hardly be called armies, but if the skirmish had ended differently, Anarol could very well have been taken by the raiders. And what about Bishop Kalubra? What would have happened if the raiders had taken the bishop? How would that have affected the circles of time? She shook her head. What mattered right now was that she had helped Cub and Corrales with the wounded, and she had to understand that although this clash of two tribes was over, there was more danger to come. She looked around at the circle of men and women, the leaders of the people of the wind. Each one wore an animal skin or bird feathers or something representing a specific role in the affairs of the tribe. Eagle Woman was in her chair, her face white but composed, her arm held immobile by a leather sling and cushioned on a bed of moss and fern. The bishop was sitting across from Polly, and beside him was Zachary, pale as alabaster. Corrales sat in his stone chair, looking unutterably weary. He wore the long white robe, and the torque with the stone the same shade as the topaz in the bishop's ring. Og was lying beside him, bruised from the raiders' blow, but Corrales assured them no bones were broken. "The snake," Tav said. "How was it that the snake came to end the fighting?" Corrales looked at Polly. "We have few snakes, and they are revered as gods. That you should have called a snake. You did call this snake." "No!" She was astonished. "I just shouted for help, but immediately the snake came." "It had nothing to do with me," Polly protested. "Maybe she was just coming on her way somewhere." "A snake does not willingly come through lines of battle," Cub said. "You called and she came." Tav hit the butt of his spear against the hard ground. "The snake came for you before at the wall, when I was first speaking with you. She is your friend. That is what you said." As Polly started to protest, again Corrales raised his hand. "It must have seemed to the raiders that you called the snake, that you had special help from the goddess, and that you yourself had special powers." "Arakai exusai," the bishop said. It was Greek. Polly knew something about powers. The bishop had called out the Kyrie. Could not Louise have come as much for that as for her own cry for help? Or was it not most likely coincidence that the snake had come along the path at just that moment? Principalities have powers, the bishop said. It would have looked to the raiders as though you could call the principalities of power. He spoke gaspingly, as though he could scarcely breathe. "Bishop!" Anarol's voice was sharp with anxiety. "Is something wrong?" All attention was drawn to the bishop, who was breathing in painful gasps. The rapid fluttering of his heart could be seen through his plaid shirt. Cub rose and went to the bishop. "Heron, our dear, it would please me if you would let me try to slow the beating of your heart. It is fast, even for a bird," the bishop nodded. "Of course, Cub, it would be a great inconvenience to everybody if I died now, and it might produce a paradox that would distort the future." Cub knelt beside the bishop, placing one hand under the plaid shirt, firmly against the bishop's chest. Polly saw Zachary's eyes lighten with interest and hope. Corrales watched Cub intently, nodding in approval. Tav looked from Cub to Corrales, then to Zachary. Zachary had disappeared during the fighting, and it seemed to Polly that Tav was looking at him with scorn, but instead of accusing Zachary, he demanded, "Where did the snake go?" "Louise the Larger," the bishop panted. "Hush, Heron," Cub said, and pressed his palm more strongly against the old man's chest. Cub's own breathing was slow and rhythmic, and the pressure of his hand reinforced the rhythm. "Where?" Tav repeated. "Hey," Zachary said. "Translate for me, Polly." "They're talking about the snake," Polly said. "Tav wants to know where she went," Zachary said. "I saw her going along the path there, and probably she went 3,000 years into the future." "You..." Tav's voice was definitely accusing. Zachary's fingers were white as he held the sides of the stone chair Corrales had assigned him. "You're talking much too fast for me to understand you, but if you want to know why I wasn't in that beer parlor brawl with you, I wouldn't have been any help. I have a weak heart, and I'd just have been in the way. He spoke with stiff pride. Quickly, Polly translated as best she could for Tav and the others. Cub withdrew his hand from the bishop's chest. There, that is better. Yes, my son, Bishop Kalubra said. I could feel my heart steadying under your hand. I thank you. Is he all right? Anarel asked anxiously. Cub nodded. His heart is beating calmly and regularly now. I am fine, the bishop said. His breathing had steadied with his heart, and he spoke normally. Now we must think what to do next. Please, Zachary said. I saw that kid, he indicated Cub. Steady the old man's heart. I saw it. Please, I want him to help my heart. Polly spoke in Ogham to Cub. Yes, I will try. Not now. Later, when we are back at the tents, Cub assured her. He will try to help you, Polly translated for Zachary. Later. The snake, Tav insisted. The snake who came for Polly. No, Polly started to deny again, but the bishop held up his hand. Yes, Tav, we must not forget Polly's snake. But she's not, Corrales addressed the bishop. Can you explain? I'm not sure. You said that for you the snake is sacred? We revere the snake, Corrales agreed. And the people across the lake, they ran from the snake. True, Corrales leaned on his elbow, his chin on his hand. They did not retreat just because we fought well, Tav said. They thought that if Polly could call the snake, then she could cause the snake to do them great harm. That is how I would feel. He looked at Polly, and she remembered his first reaction to Louise. She spoke directly to him, then turned to the others. Louise, that is what we call her, is the first harmless snake I've ever met. Where I came from before, I went to live with my grandparents. The snakes were mostly very poisonous, the bishop said. The Anula tribe of northern Australia associates a bird and a snake with rain. Corrales shook his head. The people across the lake have different traditions from ours, but as far as I know, they do not believe that snakes can bring rain. But neither they nor we would kill a snake. Eagle Woman said, The kindred of the snake would come and cause harm and vengeance. If we kill a snake, because otherwise it would kill us, or by accident, we beg pardon of the snake's spirit. Tav pointed his spear at Zachary, and all eyes turned in his direction. This is Zachary Gray, Polly said. He is from your time spiral, Cub asked. He is the one who saw Anarel, Corrales explained, because he is near death. What's he saying? Zachary asked. Polly was grateful that Zachary could not easily understand Ogham, no matter what he said about his heart and his brief life expectancy. She was certain he was not ready to hear anyone talking about his imminent death. She tried to make her face expressionless as she turned to him. Corrales wants to know where you're from. California, Zachary said. Tav stood. Corrales, you fought well. I did not want to fight, Corrales said. What I wanted to do was stop the fighting. They would have taken Anarel and Polly and the heron too. And so I fought, yes, we fought well. But they were more than we, many more, and if the snake had not come... Bless Louise the larger, the bishop said. Corrales' blue eyes brightened. Is that not enough for you, Tav? That Polly was sent to us by the goddess for this? I was so certain, Tav murmured, but perhaps he... He looked at Zachary. Hey! Zachary's voice was urgent. Slow down. I'm not quick with languages like Polly. What are they talking about? Well, Polly prevaricated, we were outnumbered by the raiders. We? Are you part of this we? She looked around the circle of stone chairs protected by the great standing stones. Yes, she was one with Anarel and Corrales and Tav and Cub and the others, and so was the bishop. He had proven that. Tav looked at her hopefully, and the paleness of his eyes was not hard or metallic, like a sky whitened and glaring from too much sun, but tender and cool like the lake. You were right when you told me the snake was your friend. Perhaps I have been wrong about the mother's needs. You are wrong indeed, Corrales stood. Bishop Heron, Polly, Zach, you must go, now while there is time. The bishop looked around. I don't think we can. Why not? Cub asked. I may be wrong, but I do not think the time gate is open. Corrales looked startled. He went to the central flat altar stone and climbed up on it. then lay down on his back, arms outstretched, eyes closed, motionless. Time seemed to hang suspended. No one spoke. The people of the wind seemed to have moved into another dimension, where it was possible for them to wait infinitely. The bishop sighed. Zachary restlessly shifted position. Polly tried not to move, but began to be afraid that her legs would cramp. At last, Corrales sat up, slowly shaking his head. The threshold is closed. And that is the end of chapter 8.